I think one of the critical issues that the Gen Z raised during the protracted demonstrations across the country was the display of opulence by politicians, which was more dominant during public fundraisings than Harambe, Mr. Speaker. I think in the spirit of Harambe, at the building of this nation, and the senior youth representative, Senator Oburu Odinga, who is older than all of us, maybe tell us, is that, Mr. Speaker, the Harambe, as we used to know in the building of this country, went and changed over time, Mr. Speaker. We have done Harambes in many things, Mr. Speaker. I can see sometimes sports, we do Harambes. I see clubs doing Harambes, AFC, Leopard, Gormaya, and the rest. Mr. Speaker, and it comes to the attention of the House that national women amputee was stranded in Frankfurt, Germany, Mr. Speaker, after even winning number 4. So I don't know whether we need to fundraise for them, Mr. Speaker, and even videos doing rounds in social media, Mr. Speaker, is they are sleeping in very bad places as they remain stranded, Mr. Speaker. I hope something can be done, but of course somebody in charge there, that is his quality of performance. Mr. Speaker, the issue of charges, religious organizations, Mr. Speaker, has been, we normally every Sunday, maybe, I don't know, Mr. Speaker, what we should do to religious organization, churches and mosques and other organizations, because they don't have direct money from anywhere, from either private or allocation from budget. And I think in future we might need to budget, Mr. Speaker, for the building of religious places, Mr. Speaker. Because even if today you are to deny Harambes to happen, Mr. Speaker, how will the church or how will the religious organization be able to fund the building of churches, the building of mosques, or any religious places of worship, Mr. Speaker? And I think we need to be very careful so that we don't overreach in this issue of regulating of financial rewards, Mr. Speaker. Because I think either the county government can budget for building of religious places of worship, or we can allocate from the national budget. In any case, 85% of national budget remains with the national and 15%, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one of the common is the issue of hospital bills. I know every senator, including yourself, you are normally in WhatsApp groups trying to fundraise for somebody who is sick, Mr. Speaker, even on compassionate grounds, even including funeral expenses, Mr. Speaker. But I think one of the biggest challenge to many Kenyans is the hospital bill. We hope the social health insurance, the share issue, will be able to resolve, Mr. Speaker. And I hope with us contributing more towards the social health authority and the now transiting from NHIF to share, Mr. Speaker, will allow Kenyans to access medical care that they will not need to call for Harambes. Because every weekend, if it is not an Harambe for funeral expenses and medical expenses, it is for education. If it is not for education, Mr. Speaker, it is for building of places of worship, Mr. Speaker. So I hope and believe that the issue of hospital bill, if we are able to address the issue of fixing SHA and ensure that access to medical care is accessible to all Kenyans through universal health coverage, Mr. Speaker, we shall reduce by 80% contributions or Harambes that are done in support of hospital bills across the country. And you know the problem, Mr. Speaker, is not even the hospital bill. It is that we have commercialized medical services in this country. When you walk to a private facility, health center, they cannot explain to you as why they are charging, for example, the amount they are charging in their medical bills. I saw in some instances a private medical facility was charging 20 million on medical bill. When you ask them the gloves, the syringes, they cannot quantify or who gives them. I think the issue we should regulate the private health facilities across the country. Because no one can tell us whenever they give you an hospital bill. And I know, for example, like Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, Jaramogi Oginga Hospital, Coast General Provincial Hospital, Nakuru, the Rift Valley, they have a way of doing waivers to the needy, Mr. Speaker, that is being done by. But these private facilities, you saw Beauty and Buy, that led to the board of the late, may her soul rest, Lucy, who was buried the other day, Mr. Speaker, that you are being told that that facility is licensed. The allegations we are hearing is licensed to provide massage and masseuse services, but you are told they were doing some surgery for beauty issues, and it shows that there is a problem within the system, Mr. Speaker, and I hope at the end of it all, we should be able to address such issues of having. Even one of the major issues is compassionate donations, Mr. Speaker. We have seen, I remember in the last session, Mr. Speaker, some of us have been around for some time. In fact, then the CORD, was it called Coalition of Restoration of Democracy? When the teachers were on strike, they came up with a pay bill to fundraise for teachers then. Although no one told us what happened to that money that was being raised, Mr. Speaker, I hope with the audit coming under this bill, we will be able to know when such causes happen, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I agree largely with the spirit of the bill, but I have reservations, Mr. Speaker, that, and you know, even in this issue of fundraising, Mr. Speaker, I have some reservations to it. What I expected from this bill, Mr. Speaker, was just the process. We should have simplified. You want to do an Harambe? Yes. Where do you go? You get a permit. But, Mr. Speaker, introducing a cabinet secretary, a CCM, audits, you know, taxation, you know, it's unnecessary. It is lethargy of the entire process, clogging the process. We should make the issue of doing an Harambe in this country to be very simple, where you just need a permit to do an Harambe. Give us a substantive reason. If it is a medical reason, let it be non-medical bills, Mr. Speaker. If it is about, Mr. Speaker, building a religious place, let it be known. If it is about compassionate grounds, let it be known, Mr. Speaker. And I don't see the need why involve. I thought the cabinet secretaries of this republic have better things to do than regulate Harambees, Mr. Speaker. I would have expected that we would just given a law that, we give even through a law that provides, Mr. Speaker, for that appeals. On the issue of appeals, Mr. Speaker, I'll clear there's public fundraising bills. You remember when there was a ravaging drought and there were issue of anger in the country, Mr. Speaker. You remember Kenyans for Kenyans that was being done to fundraise for Kenyans. I agree that such, Mr. Speaker, we can say on public fundraising appeals, we do audit. For example, I don't know whether Morara Kebaso, who is fundraising to go and audit for fuel and working around with security, I don't know whether Morara Kebaso, the proponent of Inject, is part of public fundraising appeals. Because when you fundraise to fuel your car, to do something, I don't know whether it is part of the public fundraising, and I agree there must be standards as to such, Mr. Speaker. I don't know, public fundraising involves also fundraising for campaigns. I have not seen in this bill, Mr. Speaker, although we have campaigning finance laws in this country, but this public, I think we should have just regulated in terms of auditing. Let us regulate to public fundraising appeals. We don't create bureaucracy. You can imagine some small village somewhere in Nandi. I've lost someone. Their target to bury an individual is 250,000 shillings. Why create a bureaucracy for them to look for a chief, to go and look for CCM of Sijui what, or a cabinet secretary to get an approval to fundraise for 250,000 shillings? Why don't you bring a standardized form for just permit to request to do an election, to do a fundraiser? And they should start it with the lowest person there, Mr. Speaker, that is Mzee wa Mitaa. The lowest person, just get approval from the local chief. How many in Machakos, how many people in that small village know of CCM or know of even Waziri or even sub-county administrator? I think, Mr. Speaker, it's very unfortunate that we want to do. Mr. Speaker, I don't see anything that receive, vet, and process applications. Let me walk to the chief's office with a permit to do an Harambe, let the chief look at it, then I'm allowed to do an Harambe. But to public fundraising appeals like for the food, that one you can do the vetting and approval. But on this one, sir, private, Mr. Speaker, I don't see any need. Even the audit, investigate misuse of funds, I agree. These are issues that can be done in public. Establishment of endowment funds, which is important. I know, like Ratansi and other endowment funds who support, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, even on the role of Cabinet Secretary and County Executive Committee member, Mr. Speaker, inspection of records, Mr. Speaker, there are that the CCM and a Cabinet Secretary can do rather than, Mr. Speaker, let us also be fair to this country. Let us prepare laws that are fair to the Kenyans, Mr. Speaker. No one is refusing. Harambe is good. Some of us, like me, Mr. Speaker, are product of Harambees. If I didn't get Harambe support, Mr. Speaker, maybe I would not be a senator, because even going through my schooling education, a number of us in this house. So let us not lose the real and noble intentions of Harambe. We agree individuals have hijacked Harambes to launder their money. You are seeing cases where people are contributing 5 million shillings cash, 10 million shilling cash, and their salaries are known. Somebody is earning 500,000 after tax, 300,000, and they take loan maybe through what we call mortgage, Mr. Speaker. How can somebody contribute 5 million in Harambe, and yet we know your salary, we know your cows, we know where what you do? Mr. Speaker, I agree. There was a problem where Harambes were being used to launder public money. But, Mr. Speaker, we should not kill the spirit of the Harambe. Harambe is good, and I've said, Mr. Speaker, for us who grew up in the village, it is because of Harambes that we went to schools. It is because of Harambe that cattle dips were being built. It is because of Harambe that we have good places of worship, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day. So let us not lose that good intention. Mr. Speaker, solicitation members or public for public or private benefit, I agree, Mr. Speaker. I know people who do fundraising, Mr. Speaker, for their own selfish benefit. We must root out such individuals. If you do an Harambe, it should be something. We don't want also Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, to do an Harambe to buy a vehicle or to build a personal house or to buy a good suit. We must agree that Harambes are important, Mr. Speaker. They assist in alleviating economic burdens, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think on regulation, I have insisted that let us know the target. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I'm proposing a committee of the whole. When an Harambe is being done, before a permit is issued, Mr. Speaker, if a target is beyond 1 million, let us say you need a permit from target of 1 million. But below 1 million, let us just notify the local administrator like the chief or Mzee Amita, Mr. Speaker. Because if you require a permit to do 100,000, 150,000 somewhere in Siaya, in small village, where they have a small something for funeral, I know in Luo Nyanza, the process of funeral expenses are quite expensive because it's an elaborate process. But why would people who are fundraising for 250,000 require a permit, Mr. Speaker? Let us say from 1 million and above, you need a permit. And the process of approval, let us leave it to the level of within the Ngao administration, Mr. Speaker, or CCM, Mr. Speaker. Number two, Mr. Speaker, is on the lifestyle audit. The people who do this fundraiser, they have been using to launder public money. Let also lifestyle be audited. If lifestyle audit is done, we don't need this law. If you lifestyle audit for individuals, Mr. Speaker, we suspect, Mr. Speaker, I'm rushing through so that my colleagues can. In clause number 11, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy. And I want to, Mr. Speaker, you saw my county assembly yesterday when the ad hoc report was being tabled to try and redeem Nandi County from bad governance of Governor Sang, Mr. Speaker. They ended up disagreeing, Mr. Speaker, because people are stealing to go and give in public. People are stealing county money to go and do big fundraisers, Mr. Speaker. In fact, Mr. Speaker, when you find my governor in public Harambes, like Governor Sang is giving 1,500,000, yet we know the salary. That is how corruption thrives, for example, in Nandi, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank the great people of Nandi for coming out in large numbers yesterday, up to midnight, Mr. Speaker, to defend and protect their rights, Mr. Speaker. Even I'm happy, I want to tell the church, the religious organization, Sadaka Ijaguswa. So I heard a senator saying when he appeared before the church, the pastor was preaching that this public fundraiser, I want to assure the church and religious organizations. Mr. Speaker, I know Pastor Nganga and the rest of retinue, Pastor Nganga and the rest of preachers might blame the Senate. I want to assure Pastor Nganga and the rest, Mr. Speaker, that the Sadaka and tithes has not been touched. So it will not form part of public. So members, the issue of Sadaka, tithes, and donation to the church, and even joining membership of your organization, Mr. Speaker, shall not be touched. And even, Mr. Speaker, the issue of receiving lottery or raffle like winning sport pesa and the rest, Mr. Speaker, has not been touched. So I want to assure members, because I met my religious leaders, I've been argued on basis whether sadaka or tithes, it has not been touched. The law has exempted such, the tithes and sadaka not to be touched, Mr. Speaker, and therefore I want to agree. Mr. Speaker, moving on swiftly. On clause number 13, I can see my time is almost. Mr. Speaker, I don't agree that we ban public officers or elected officials from conducting an Harambe. What I'm proposing, let us not make it 3 years, let us make it 6 months to elections. And in case of a by-election, let us agree 1 month before a by-election, Mr. Speaker. 3 years, Mr. Speaker, if 3 years is into, all of us will be disqualified from participating in 2027. Because let us make it 6 months to the general election. We ban public officials and elected members of parliament from conducting a fundraiser, Mr. Speaker. And also the fine should be reduced from 5 million to 500,000, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of submitted for permit, Mr. Speaker, I don't see the need of cabinet secretary. The Kenyan cabinet secretary are too busy to regulate Harambees. Please, let us ensure cabinet secretaries are not part, they are too busy. If they cannot even come here to answer our questions, what are you telling us, Mr. Speaker, will be able to approve permits of 250,000 on my village in Mosoriat, Mr. Speaker? Let us also be honest. What is a cabinet secretary doing issuing a permit when they cannot even do their job right? Mr. Speaker, let us, in fact, the cabinet secretary should be allowed to do other more important things, Mr. Speaker. Let us avoid this. The cabinet secretary, the CCM, should keep off the Harambees, Mr. Speaker. Let the government keep off the Harambees. Let the people self-regulate. Let the law regulate, Mr. Speaker, so that we don't use Harambees, Mr. Speaker, at the experience of others, Mr. Speaker. So please, the cabinet secretary are too busy. We have given them more responsibility than regulating Harambe of 250,000 shillings somewhere in Mosoriot or somewhere in Mumbai village, somewhere in Kaptel, Mr. Speaker, or somewhere in Chemamul or Setek in Tinred, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I totally disagree with auditing of Harambes, Mr. Speaker, especially for private one. If I've raised 250,000 to do a funeral expense, why would you do an audit of 200? In fact, you will be using more money sending KRA officers to come and audit 250,000 shillings that are meant for funeral expenses, or 250,000 to send a child to school. What is this, Mr. Speaker? KRA have more important things than auditing fundraisers, Mr. Speaker. So on the issue of taxation, the KRA involvement of auditing, Mr. Speaker, let us give the standard. Let us say if you raise, especially public fundraising, your Safaricom Kenyans for Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, although I've never understood why Safaricom, when your data expires, they take it away. I find it that corruption. Mr. Speaker, when we have raised 100 million, for example, let KRA and others audit. But this small money, Mr. Speaker, you don't need to burden KRA. We have more better things in this country. Mr. Speaker, I will only support this law, Mr. Speaker, if it is only to give a regulatory framework on how to conduct an Harambe in a simplified version. Let us not create bureaucracy in terms of conducting Harambes, Mr. Speaker. Let us allow the church and public places to do the Harambes, Mr. Speaker. Let us allow Kenyans who don't have economically burden to do private Harambes of medical expenses, of compassionate expenses, Mr. Speaker. Let us allow Kenyans to do funeral Harambes to send their children to universities, Mr. Speaker. I agree. There is a progressive university funding model, but it will not touch every Kenyan. There are many young men and women who are in school today, courtesy of Harambes. I'm a product of Harambe, Mr. Speaker. I think we need to rethink about this law. And I will be asking my brother, Senator Cherargei, to rethink about this law. We might even request him to withdraw first so that we come up with a simplified version of conducting an Harambes, Mr. Speaker. We should not say because GNC were protesting. They are only non-leaders. If you see a leader giving out 20 million or 55 million in a Harambe, what the best you can do is to tell the EACC to do lifestyle audit. You don't ban the Harambe. If you see Cherargei giving 20 million in an Harambe, and you know he doesn't have that money, just send the EACC to do lifestyle audit and KRA. That's how we resolve this issue. Mr. Speaker, allow me 30 minutes. I think the Spirit of the Lord has just gotten, not 30 minutes, 1 second, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I reject this fundraising bill until we amend it to to fit Kenyans so that they can comfortably do fundraising without interference from government or from anybody.